Hi, I'm Rowena. My mom banned me from our family dinner, and the whole table laughed like I was the joke. But I didn't cry. I asked the owner for a seat. Because the owner? He knew me. They've tried to erase me for years, told people I was unstable, stole my scholarship, rewrote my father's will. And the worst part? They smiled while doing it. How do you sit across from people who betray you with a straight face? Would you still call them family? I stood at the hostess stand of Callahan's, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The woman behind the counter gave me a tight-lipped smile before scanning her screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no Judson listed for tonight's reservation." For a moment, I thought I misheard. I checked my phone. 7:15 p.m. Saturday night. Exactly when my mother said the family dinner would start. "There must be a mistake," I said calmly. "My mother made a reservation for 6. The hostess didn't even flinch. "There is a reservation for 6, but it's under Tanya Judson." Tanya, my sister, not me. I shifted slightly and glanced past her toward the dining area. There they were, my mother Deborah, Tanya, their husbands, and Deborah's longtime friend who always insisted on being included in family matters. They were mid-laugh, glasses raised, plates already half finished. So they were here, on time, without me. I clenched my jaw and smoothed my dress. My mother hadn't forgotten. She'd excluded me, on purpose. As I stepped forward, Tanya noticed me first. Her eyes widened, but not with surprise, more like satisfaction. Then Deborah looked up. She didn't flinch, didn't wave me over. Instead, she lifted her wineglass and called out across the room with a grin sharp enough to draw blood. "Well, well, you actually came." She laughed. "Didn't expect to see you here, sweetie. This place might be a bit upscale for your usual vibe, huh?" The table chuckled. Tanya raised a brow, tilting her wineglass as if in silent toast to my humiliation. I froze for just a second, every nerve in my body screaming for me to turn and walk out. But no, not this time. I took a breath and turned back to the hostess. "Would you mind letting Mr. Reuben Callahan know that Rowena Judson is here to speak with him?" She blinked. "Mr. Callahan? The owner?" "Yes." Behind me, I heard Tanya's high-pitched laugh. "Oh, come on. You really think dropping names is going to get you a seat?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Moments later, Reuben appeared from the private corridor. Calm, polished, the same as I remembered. He spotted me immediately, and his face softened. "Rowena," he greeted, voice warm. "It's been too long." I smiled. "Glad you're here, Reuben." He turned to the staff. "Please prepare a seat for Miss Judson at the family table." The entire table went dead quiet. Tanya's fork slipped. Deborah's smile froze in place. "She's not just a guest," Reuben continued. "She's family." Deborah's lips twitched. She wasn't used to being outplayed, especially not in public. As I walked toward their table, past the stares, the pitying looks from strangers, I stopped just behind my mother. I bent down slightly, close enough so only she could hear me. "Let's not pretend anymore, Mother." My mother didn't respond. Her face barely moved, but I caught the twitch in her jaw. Tanya stopped mid-sip, her glass hovering in the air like she forgot how gravity worked. The air around our table turned stiff. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the chair beside Reuben and sat down slowly, deliberately. He leaned toward a waiter and murmured something. A moment later, I was offered the exclusive chef's menu, something not even regulars received on a Saturday night. Deborah cleared her throat and let out a tight chuckle. "Reuben must be feeling nostalgic. Don't take it too seriously, dear." Reuben didn't miss a beat. "Actually, I take integrity very seriously, Mrs. Judson." I heard someone at a nearby table softly say, "Yikes," under their breath. I smiled, but only inside. This wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. For a moment, no one spoke. Tanya shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. Deborah picked up her wineglass, but didn't drink. That silence? I let it breathe, let them stew in it. I thought about how I ended up here, this exact moment. 3 days ago, I sat across from Reuben at a quiet cafe near the marina. He looked uneasy, stirred his coffee twice before speaking. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," he said, voice low, "but your mother called me, years ago. right after we met about the restaurant proposal. I blinked. What? She said you were unstable, impulsive, said I'd regret working with you. He looked at me apologetic. At the time, I didn't know better. I remember nodding, biting the inside of my cheek. I didn't cry, not in front of him. Back in the present, I picked up my water and took a slow sip. Reuben told me what you said about me, I said, not bothering to hide the ice in my tone. Deborah gave me a tight smile. You've always been dramatic, Rowena. I simply gave him a realistic view of your tendencies. No, I put the glass down. You slandered me. You sabotaged my reputation. You did it behind my back because you didn't have the guts to do it to my face. She laughed once. Oh, please. You were chasing pipe dreams. Someone had to tell him the truth. Tanya muttered, Come on, this again? I looked at her, calm. He was about to invest in my dream, a real future. But you made sure he hesitated. You didn't just doubt me, you poisoned the well. Deborah rolled her eyes. If you failed, it would have been on me. And if I succeeded? I leaned forward. You couldn't handle that either. Reuben looked between us and then settled his gaze on Deborah. Some legacies don't fade, he said softly but firmly, but some do rot. Deborah didn't speak, but I could see the way her spine stiffened, like she'd been caught in a draft she didn't expect. Tanya mumbled something about drama queens, her tone coated in syrup and venom. Reuben didn't engage. He simply signaled for the waiter to begin service. The plates arrived, elegant, pristine, but no one touched a thing. I picked up my fork, cut into the appetizer, and placed a small bite on my tongue. The flavors blurred. It was good, I knew that, but my taste buds weren't the problem. Tanya let out a light chuckle. Still got that flair for theatrics, huh? I didn't answer. I just looked down at my plate, letting the memory flood in like a slow-moving tide. It was spring, 2019, my wedding day, Del Mar Garden. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, jazz trio, fresh white roses, sunset behind us. The seating chart had been agonized over for weeks. I'd saved the front row seat for her, labeled with her name, tied with a single white ribbon. She never came. I stood at the altar, trying not to look in that direction. Tanya whispered, She has a migraine, don't cause a scene. So I smiled. I cut the cake, I danced, I toasted. 2 days later, I saw a tagged photo of her, sipping cocktails on a yacht in Cabo. Same weekend, same time, smiling with strangers while I stood alone under fairy lights, telling myself it wasn't personal, but it was. I swallowed and placed my fork down, napkin folded neatly. Funny, I said, eyes on my mother. You couldn't bother to show up to my wedding, but this dinner? Impeccable timing. Deborah raised her eyebrows, amused. Your wedding wasn't exactly our kind of event. I tilted my head. No, Mom, it wasn't your kind, it was mine. And you made sure I knew I was on my own. She reached for her wine. Don't be so dramatic. You always make everything about you. I leaned in slightly. Maybe if someone else had tried to make anything about me, I wouldn't have to. There was silence again, the kind that fills every inch of a room without making a sound. Tanya broke it with a smug smile, raising her glass. That chip on your shoulder must weigh a ton. I didn't respond to Tanya's jab. I just stared at her, calm even, like a poker player holding the best hand at the table. She didn't know I'd already seen behind her smile, and she sure as hell didn't know I had the receipts. The tension thinned slightly as the entrees were placed down with quiet precision. Deborah swirled her wine without drinking it. Tanya leaned toward me across her plate of sea bass, voice suddenly sweet as syrup. So, how's that restaurant project of yours going? Still chasing little startups? I dabbed the corner of my mouth, slow and deliberate. You mean the one you pretended to care about 2 months ago? She blinked, then smiled, falsely innocent. I was just being supportive. Right. 2 months ago, she'd called out of nowhere, asked to meet for lunch, said she missed me. That alone should have triggered every red flag I had. But I went. Maybe I wanted to believe she meant it. We met at a spot in Hillcrest, quiet and casual. She ordered a kale salad and asked about my plans. I told her, just a little. I was excited, proud. I said I was working on a new concept, fast casual Mediterranean, sustainable supply chain, aiming for 3 locations in the first year, still under wraps. She smiled and nodded, asked investor-type questions that I mistook for curiosity. 2 weeks later, a contact of mine forwarded me a pitch deck from a local angel group. The concept, branding, market plan, even the rollout schedule, it was mine. Word for word. Except the name on the pitch, Tanya's boyfriend. She didn't just steal an idea, she weaponized my trust. I looked back at her now. Her smile had thinned. "If you're ever short on ideas," I said smoothly, "maybe next time just call me directly, instead of sending your boyfriend to pitch my deck." Tanya's eyes narrowed before snapping into that fake laugh of hers. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do." I cut into my food, still not breaking eye contact. Deborah finally chimed in, her tone sharp. "Let's not turn this into another performance." "No performance here," I replied, "just clearing the air." "You always make people uncomfortable," Tanya hissed. "Is that your thing now?" "No," I said, laying down my fork. "But if betrayal makes people squirm, that's not on me." Deborah looked between us, irritation flashing behind her mascara-heavy eyes. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "And if you're wondering how I handle betrayal these days, keep watching." Tanya's grin faltered. Her confidence cracked just enough to show the nerves she tried to hide. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I pressed forward because surviving was never the goal. Tonight, I was done ducking punches. I was swinging back. I folded my hands gently in front of my dessert plate. "Since we're sharing," I said evenly, "did either of you hear about the scholarship I tried to set up in Dad's name?" Deborah glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "It was meant to be small, quiet, a fun for culinary students who grew up like he did, without much. Just something to honor him." No response, just the sound of silverware gently clinking on porcelain. "Well, the grant board got a letter. Anonymous, of course, but carefully worded, said the family didn't approve of his name being used in connection with my business." I looked straight at Deborah. "You signed it, didn't you?" She didn't blink, but her posture stiffened like stone. Tanya fidgeted with her napkin. "You always twist things," Deborah said calmly. "No, I remember them exactly how they happened. You tried to erase him again, but this time through me." Reuben, quiet until now, set down his glass with a dull tap. No one said a word. I wasn't done. "And while we're pulling receipts, Tanya, guess who called me last week? Mallory, from college. Remember her?" Tanya hesitated, then shrugged. "She apologized," I continued. "Said she felt awful for skipping my wedding. Said someone told her I had canceled it last minute and was having another breakdown." Tanya's face drained of color. "You didn't just want distance. You wanted isolation. You weren't satisfied with cutting me out. You had to make sure no one else stayed in." Deborah exhaled, annoyed. "You were always fragile. Everyone had to walk on eggshells." "No, Mom. You just didn't like it when someone pointed out the cracks." The waiter returned to refill water. I didn't move. I leaned in slightly and said with a calm clarity that quieted even the air, "This is your warning." Deborah scoffed. "Is this a threat now?" "No, it's a line. I've stopped asking for space at your table. I'm carving my own, and trust me, it's standing room only." Tanya gave a short, dry laugh. "You sound ridiculous." I picked up my glass, steady hands, no shake in my voice. "Try me again, and next time, it won't just be words." Deborah calmly lifted her napkin, dabbed her lips like the night hadn't spiraled into a silent war zone. Her posture didn't scream panic, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. She was preparing something. "Well then," she said with a controlled smile, "since we're laying cards out—" I didn't blink, and then Tanya reached into her purse and pulled out a tri-folded paper with her signature fake warmth. "Thought I'd share this with the family," she said, sliding it across the table like it was just another menu. "It's official. I've been appointed interim CEO of Judson Designs." I stared at the paper, then slowly reached for it. My hands were steady. The ink was fresh, signatures legit, notarized, no mention of me, not even a courtesy copy. Deborah added, "After the estate review, we needed a leadership plan that made sense." My jaw didn't drop, my voice didn't shake, but the temperature in my veins dropped 10 degrees. "You cut me out," I said slowly, "behind closed doors." "You've been distant," Deborah replied matter of fact. You didn't engage. Tanya showed commitment. You mean she kissed the ring? Tanya leaned back, satisfied. It's not personal, Rowena. It's about who shows up. I looked her dead in the eye. You're damn right it's not personal. It's calculated. You didn't just remove me, you erased me. A man at the next table glanced over. Another sipped their wine slowly, pretending not to eavesdrop. I didn't care anymore. I folded the document in half, then again. This will not stand. Deborah gave a dismissive wave. It's done. No, I said, quieter than before. It's fraud. Tanya's voice dipped. You don't have proof. I stood. Yet. I smoothed my dress, took one last look at the table that used to define me. Enjoy your dessert, I said, stepping back. You'll be choking on it soon. I turned and began walking away. Behind me, Tanya called out, smug and shrill. You were never going to win, Rowena. I stopped mid-stride. Tanya's voice still echoed behind me, smug and venomous. I turned slowly, heels clicking on the marble floor like punctuation marks. Every eye at the table was on me, but I wasn't looking for their approval. I walked back to the table with a calm that felt like thunderclouds rolling in. You think this is about winning? I said, placing my phone gently on the linen. I tapped the screen. A voicemail played, on speaker. Rowena, this is Daniel from the firm. I went over that waiver from 2006, the one your mother had you sign before college. That wasn't a release form. It was misrepresented. Technically, it was masked as a grant document. It won't hold in court. Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. Deborah's hands froze around her wine glass. I looked at her, controlled. That piece of paper you used to shut me out? Turns out it's void. You lied to a teenager and called it estate planning. Deborah opened her mouth, closed it again. Tanya tried to jump in. You weren't even involved back then. You made sure I wasn't. I reached into my bag, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid a printed copy across the table. Here's another throwback for you. Remember the Callahan Scholarship I proposed back in 2014? A pilot fund for women in culinary arts? Reuben leaned forward. Someone applied using a fake name. But the email, the birthday, even the headshot, it was you, Tanya. You photoshopped your own image onto my idea. He looked stunned. Tanya blinked rapidly, her smile collapsing. I needed that money, she said weakly. You stole that money, I corrected. You didn't even tell me. You could have asked. You didn't. It was years ago. And that makes it okay? I asked. You didn't just take a check. You took credit. You took opportunity. That was supposed to help girls like us, not bury me further. Tanya pushed her plate away, lips trembling. Deborah looked ready to implode. That voicemail could be anyone. It's admissible, I said simply. Guests from nearby tables had stopped pretending not to listen. One whispered to another. A woman across the room said aloud, This isn't a family meal. It's a takedown. Deborah stiffened. You don't have proof of intent. I don't need it, I said, rising to my feet, because everyone here can see exactly what you intended. I turned to Reuben, my voice low and level. I think it's time I opened the real envelope. I reached into my bag slowly, deliberately. The weight of the restaurant seemed to shift, like the air thickened with curiosity, confusion, fear. My fingers wrapped around the aged envelope, the one with frayed edges and my father's handwriting across the front. To my daughter Rowena, do not let them rewrite your legacy. I placed it gently on the table. Tanya scoffed. Deborah narrowed her eyes. Reuben leaned in, already sensing something seismic was about to break. This showed up 2 weeks ago, I said, voice steady. Hidden in an old toolbox at Aunt Claire's place, locked in a cedar box with Dad's initials carved on the top. I paused, then opened the flap. There was a letter and a will. Tanya let out a laugh that cracked at the end. Another letter? You think? I unfolded the document and slid it across the table, facing Reuben. He read in silence. The letter spoke first. I trust Rowena with the Judson name, the business idea she once shared with me, and the scholarship in my memory. I've split the estate equally, but if the family ever disputes her right to lead, this document stands as my final word. I looked up. This was notarized, 6 months before he died. Deborah was already shaking her head. That was never filed. That's invalid. He changed it. Reuben stood straighter. He didn't. I know the attorney. This is real, and it's binding. Gasps rippled across the restaurant. A fork clattered from another table. Somewhere near the bar, someone whispered, "Oh my God, they really tried to cut her out." Tanya's face paled to ash. "You can't be serious." I met her stare with full force. "You wore my dress. You took my clients. You silenced my name. And when none of that stopped me, you tried to erase my father's wishes too." Deborah's hands trembled slightly. She blinked hard. "You weren't ready, Rowena. You weren't strong enough. You always fell apart." "Funny," I said, eyes on her. "Here I am, still standing." Reuben's hand landed on my shoulder, firm but kind. "And from what I've seen tonight, you're the only one who's carried the Judson name with integrity." The room was no longer eating. They were witnessing. I turned to Tanya, then Deborah. "This isn't revenge. It's correction." The hush in the room didn't lift. Not after my last words. Not after my father's letter. The tension hovered like mist, too thick to ignore, too honest to sweep aside. Deborah wouldn't meet my eyes. Tanya looked like a wind-up doll stuck mid-spin. Reuben hadn't moved his hand from my shoulder, grounding me. I stepped back from the table slowly, aware of every eye in the restaurant on me. I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't proud. I was whole, for the first time in years. "I won't be filing anything tonight," I said, voice measured. "Not yet." Deborah's head snapped up. "You're bluffing. You have no standing." "I have a notarized will, a recorded voicemail, a forged pitch deck, and more witnesses than you planned on." I tilted my head. "But sure, let's call it a bluff." Tanya pushed her chair back, the legs squeaking loud against the hardwood. "So what now? You ruin us? Sue us all?" "No," I said. "I move forward. You stay stuck." "You think people will believe you?" Deborah's voice cracked. "After everything?" I scanned the room. A man nodded solemnly at me. A woman across the aisle offered a quiet thumbs up. Even the waitress, who had refilled my glass hours ago, gave me a tiny, affirming smile. "They already do," I replied. Tanya stood, jaw clenched. "You're not coming back from this." I smiled, tired but steady. "I don't need to come back," I said, "because I never left. You just tried to erase me." Deborah slumped slightly in her chair, her world unraveling. Her power, built on secrets and silence, was dissolving under fluorescent lights and linen tablecloths. Reuben handed me his business card. "When you're ready, come by the office. We'll file everything legally." "Thank you," I said, slipping it into my purse. I took one last look at the table, the broken dynasty they tried to protect by breaking me. Then I walked toward the exit, not with vengeance, with freedom. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered, clean. My phone buzzed, a text from the scholarship board, the real one, approved. "Let's move forward with Judson Legacy. Congratulations, Rowena." I looked back through the glass door one last time. Tanya still standing, Deborah still stunned. And me? I walked away. Not because I lost my place at the table, but because I finally realized that seat was always mine. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that silence doesn't keep peace. It just lets injustice settle in. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream or fight. It's simply to stand, to speak, to stop apologizing for existing. I used to believe that being left out meant I was the problem. But now I know I wasn't missing from the table. I was the table. And if you've ever felt like you didn't belong or that your voice didn't matter, let me be the one to remind you, you don't need permission to take up space. You never did. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to someone you loved, just to protect your own peace? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this video hit home for you, or let me know where you're watching from. If this story made you feel seen, heard, or just a little braver, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter in our journey. Because out here, we speak the truth, even if our voice shakes.